Facebook page?
Yeah, Facebook
Okay.
page and the website. But it is 7 o'clock, so I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. And the first order of business is pledge to the flag, so I'm going to mute everyone. Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now you're all unmuted except for those of you who chose to mute yourselves. First order of business is the minutes of our May 11th meeting. Were there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, could I have a motion that they be approved as written?
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Shaw. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Second by Trustee Cormos. Any discussion?
I have to abstain, obviously, because I wasn't there.
Okay. All in favor of these approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Next order of business is mayor announcements. I have 5 announcements tonight. First of all, in terms of the COVID-19 situation, as you all know, phase 1 started Wednesday, May 20th, which means that potentially phase 2 could start Wednesday, June 3rd. It could also be delayed beyond that. I'm considering Village Hall to be in phase 2 under administrative support. And so we have been planning and preparing for the Village Hall potentially to open a week from tomorrow. Sneeze guards are being installed this week. And they're also being installed in the library and the court, but I've asked them to do the Village Hall first. We've got a good supply of Purell, face masks, gloves, all stocked. And the village clerk is preparing a plan that will limit the number of people who can be in the Village Hall at one time and preparing signs to provide people with alternatives to coming in. So hopefully we'll have all of that stuff in place. We have our weekly staff meeting tomorrow and we'll go over all the details then, and anything that still needs to be worked out, we'll have at least a week to get. Second, the BOA grant, Brownfield Opportunity Area. As I think you know, the money is in the New York State budget. That program has typically been announced in May and it has not been announced so far this year. We assume that if it is announced, the deadline will also be extended. The deadline is usually July, but the consultant tells me that it's going to take them 6 weeks to get the nomination study done. So if and when the announcement is made, the consultants will start their work. In the meanwhile, I've asked them not to do anything until the announcement is official, because I don't want to have to pay them if we're not going to do this. Number 3, I went on the FEMA grants portal as directed and set up and activated the village account for the COVID-19 disaster on May 1st. New York State is actually being very helpful. They've hired disaster assistant representatives and they've assigned one to us, and I've been in touch with him several times by email and over the phone. He tells me that the start date for the disaster has been moved back to January 19th. So I've asked the treasurer's office to go back through our records. They were already keeping records starting in March when we declared the first state of emergency. I've asked them to go back to January 19th and compile all the records back to then. The disaster rep also tells me that there is aid for municipalities less than 500,000 people, and that the village should expect to be reimbursed for all COVID-related expenditures, which is good news because I thought nothing had been approved for municipalities under 500,000. 4, I was notified that New York State has placed on hold all discretionary local aid grants, including AIM. We get AIM every year, and this year we budgeted it at $42,000. So that's been put on hold. They didn't say anything specifically about the other grants, but I assume that this will also apply to the Farley grant, the Tedisco grant, and the Walsh grant. So those are kind of up in the air for the time being, along with our AIM and along with our highway funding.
What about CHIPS?
CHIPS, that's the highway funding.
Oh, okay. That's on hold?
They haven't said anything specifically
Oh,
about it.
okay.
They've just said all discretionary local aid grants.
Okay.
When you say the Walsh grant, you don't mean the library grant? Don't we have that money in hand already?
No, the Walsh grant was $50,000 for valve work at the
Okay, that grant. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Lowell Street pump station.
Hey, Mayor, before we move off of that, and I don't know whether we need to land it today, but to the extent that that is a continuing situation, but certain of our infrastructure improvements are urgent, if you will.
Especially we have to do whether we get state money.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to think about whether we need to, frankly, bond some of that. I don't know whether maybe we have enough money in the budget to do the wall behind EML, but I don't know about the valves.
Yeah, I think the valves might have already been done even.
You and Larry, you and Noah are really very soft.
Yeah,
Very what?
You
you
sound
sort of go in and out a
coming in
little
and out.
bit.
Your
voice-wise.
voice
Oh,
is,
I thought you were saying I was soft. I didn't know how to do that.
oh, sorry, soft spoken.
Well, sorry, I think I don't think
I'll
there's
yell.
anything I can do about it. Nope, the volume's all the way up, so
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, I agree with you, Noah. We'll go ahead with the wall. We'll go ahead with the other things that have to be done. Cuomo has suggested that a likely outcome of all of this is a 20% cut in all local aid. So nobody is suggesting that we're not going to get any of it, but just for right now, it's on hold. And Cuomo's estimate at the current time is that we'll only get 80% of it instead of 100%.
Okay. I mean, I think, if we have to, I think this is unfortunately a bit of a Peter Paul situation. I think we're just going to have to the extent we get the money in the future, pay off that bond or allocate it to that payment. But I don't think we can wait, especially on that wall.
Right, I agree. And
From what I've heard,
Jeff the specs for the wall and told him to start prepping it.
Okay.
from what I've heard, they're going to wait and see if the feds are going to, provide funding for the states and the municipalities before they let any of this money go.
Yep,
That's what
everybody's
I've heard.
waiting on everybody else except for the people like us who can't wait.
Right. Larry, just if I may clarify, like these FEMA related expenses, that's for things like the sneeze guard, the supplies needed. That's the kind of thing that we would get reimbursed for FEMA. I mean, I know, there's special reimbursement if anybody's sick or that kind of thing, sick leave and that kind of thing. But so what are those the kinds of expenses we're talking about?
Yes, among other things, but the definitions are really not completed.
Okay.
The disaster rep is taking specific questions about specific expenses and going and trying to find out specific answers and getting back to us. So,
Well, maybe we can put I'm being facetious here, the 20% we're going to lose of all our aid, we can put that in for COVID-related expenses under FEMA.
Yeah, that's one thing that he's already told me we can't get reimbursed for is lost income.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
That's got to be a terrible job title, disaster specialist.
yeah. All right, and last, we got new update on the county sales tax situation. County sales tax receipts from the first of the year through May of 2020 are down 27% compared to the same period last year. However, year-to-date village totals are slightly up, not very much. They're essentially even, but we have not seen a decrease at this point. However, our receipt for the month of May 2020 was $20,000 less than we received in May of 2019. So it looks like it's heading down, but so far we have not been impacted.
How does that work? Like, how can it be 27% down for the year, but the village be basically even? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, the sales tax, I think we are in a growth area. I think the towns of Ballston and Milton have expanding populations and building and all sorts of stuff going on, all sorts of economic activity. So I'm not sure exactly how the formula works, but I can just report the numbers.
Well, I mean, my friend Frank Rossi and I had a whole lot of back and forth a couple of years ago about how it works. My memory is that it's just allocated based on assessed value. I mean, it's not as if like if Linnea sells more waffles, then somehow we get more sales tax revenue. That's not the way it works.
No.
no, we don't.
So
It's based
I
on
don't- again, I
assessed
don't
value
understand.
and
Is it
our,
because our assessed value is going up at a rate that offsets the decrease in the overall denominator? Is that the idea?
no, actually, we're a smaller and smaller percent. So that's why it doesn't affect us as much.
But it should affect, I mean, okay. I went to law school and I'm bad at math. So somebody's going to have to explain it to me in a way that makes sense, because I'm still not understanding how the overall revenue for the county can have gone down 27%, but the village receipts are not impacted. That doesn't add up to me.
I think it's because we're a small percentage of the county that if you look at it in dollars, it isn't that much of a fluctuation.
But it would go down by that much, whatever the raw dollars are.
Right. As far as a percentage, I would agree with you, but maybe in the overall dollars, it's not that significant.
All right,
We
27%
keep getting a smaller and smaller percent every year because our assessed values stayed the same.
Anyway, sorry, Mayor.
All right, moving along. Under old business, we discussed last meeting the proposal from this outfit, Civic CMS, to do work on a new website. Could I have a motion to accept that proposal?
So moved.
Motion by trustee Shaw. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Raymond. Any discussion? I'd like to thank trustee Cormos and treasurer Lasky for doing the footwork behind getting this proposal to us.
As promised, I shared some, calls that I made to a number of the towns that use Civic Plus, and overwhelmingly the reviews are positive. Some towns, went through a whole RFP process and, still unanimously picked Civic Plus. They say it's user-friendly, the public likes it. One interesting point is that it's easy enough to use that department heads and board chairs input their own information. They don't have to go to, a village person. So potentially the chairs of planning and zoning and parks and all of those can put in their own agendas and minutes and not have to send it into Village Hall, which would be, I think an advantage. I don't know how that works with users, but that is something a lot of the other towns are doing.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion is approved. And that brings us to new business. First item under new business is a motion that the town of Milton be granted permission to utilize the firehouses for the primary election and the general election. And I would add to this motion the same thing that we added to the last batch of stuff that we approved. And Madam Clerk, you can just take that straight from the last set of minutes if you want, but it was to the effect that conditional on any New York State orders in place at the times.
All right.
We're happy for them to use the firehouses if New York State will allow the firehouses to be used at the time that they want to use it. Could I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by trustee Fitzpatrick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Cormos. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. That motion carries. Second item of new business is the annual appointments of the officers of the fire department. These are typically made at the organizational meeting in April, but because of the COVID situation, the fire department had not been able, excuse me, to hold its election at that time. So we just received these this month. And those appointments are Chief Michael Bayshore, First Assistant Chief Kevin Crow, Second Assistant Chief Glenn Bowers, Third Assistant Chief Patrick Morrissey, and Secretary Stanley DeLong. Could I have a motion to ratify my appointments of those positions?
So moved.
Motion by trustee Raymond. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by trustee Fitzpatrick. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. That motion carries. The next item of business is contracts that our attorney wrote to cover our mutually beneficial relationships with several not-for-profits in our community, including the Ballston Area Community Center, the Ballston Area Rec Commission, Brookside Museum, National Bottle Museum, and Friends of the Cateros. It's been pointed out to me since I distributed these that we possibly need to add the Ballston Spa Business and Professional Association. I will look into that, and if so, then that'll come down the pike at a later date. But the ones that we've got ready tonight are those 5 that I just named. Could I have a motion that they be approved?
I make that motion.
Motion by trustee Cormos. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by trustee Shaw. Any discussion?
The only discussion is, were these were not attached to the agenda, I don't believe, right?
I think I sent them out in a separate email.
You
So
did.
you sent them to us, but I'm just wondering about the public.
No, I don't think the public has seen them.
Okay.
Certainly, if any member of the public did want to see them, they could request a copy from the clerk.
I think, yeah, I mean, they're simple and straightforward. I mean, we've all reviewed them. They basically just memorialize what the arrangement has always been. It's just, this is a housekeeping sort of good hygiene exercise, not like a newsworthy event or any change in the funding or other terms and conditions that have always existed between the town or between the village and these organizations. I think that providing the agreements, will make that clear. I would suggest that that they should be attached as part of the minutes, so that when the minutes are posted, the agreements are attached and that people can see them.
Did you get that, Madam Clerk?
I did.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Those agreements are approved. Next item of business is a resolution for engineering services. Whereas the village utilizes the services of an engineering firm in order to provide various expertise related to the operations and functioning of the village. And whereas in July of 2019, the village engaged the services of Chazen Engineering, Land Surveying, and Landscape Architecture Company to provide engineering services for a year's term. And whereas the current contract for services with Chazen expires on May 31st, now therefore it is resolved that based on the satisfactory services provided by Chazen during the prior year, the village has determined to extend the current contract for an additional year's time until May 31st, 2021, with all other terms and conditions contained in the professional services agreement continuing to apply. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by trustee Raymond, second.
I second.
Second by trustee Cormos, I think.
No, it's
No.
not.
Fitzpatrick. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. That motion carries. The board and possibly others will recall from our discussions during the budget process that we discussed the need for additional cleaning services in the village hall and the library. And we have identified a cleaning service and prepared agreements with them. They'll be doing the village hall once a month. They'll be doing the library once a week, and that money is budgeted for in the general fund and the library fund respectively. So could I have a motion to approve the contracts with F&C Cleaning Systems for the Village Hall and Village Library?
I make that motion.
Motion by trustee Fitzpatrick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Shaw. Any discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I know what that the library wants. There were two ways in this contract. I don't know what and I can't remember if we discussed this, Larry, but there's a provision where you pay a little extra every month, and that towards having the carpets cleaned annually. So is the village, I know the library is going to be doing that. Is the village, is that also the way the village is going to do it?
No, that option is not in the village hall contract.
Okay.
That's specific to the library contract. The
Okay.
library gets a lot more traffic and a lot more kids playing on the floor. So that's more of a concern, I think, for them.
Okay.
So that was something they specifically wanted.
I was wondering now with, COVID-19 and the additional, I assume, cleaning requirements, is that going to be handled by village staff to, wipe down counters with disinfectant, etc.? I believe some of those things are necessary with, the phase 2.
That's what we're doing in the village hall.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's
And
actually. a
library
requirement-
staff.
Yeah, it's a requirement of reopening, and you have to actually set up a schedule for it and do the whole, and have a plan. Yes.
Yeah, so none of that is incorporated into this contract.
No.
This is just general cleaning. Okay, just to understand.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. That brings us to the budget transfers. Last meeting, we approved the majority of necessary budget transfers, but I did indicate at that time that there would be some more coming in. It's possible that there might be a few more trickling in even at our next meeting in June, but that should be the end of them. So could I have a motion that the list of budget transfers that's attached to the agenda be approved?
And make that motion.
Trustee Cormos, is there a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Shaw. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Budget transfers are approved. So I think that takes care of the A fund and the L fund. I think we're still doing a little bit of cleanup on the G fund and the TA fund, although that one may not need to come before the board, I'm not sure. But we're drawing together all of the loose ends on the 2020 budget daily, and hopefully we'll have it all, whatever last dregs need to be done, we'll be ready for the next meeting. That brings us to the consent agenda, and I do have a change on the consent agenda involving the first two items. Eagle Matt Lee Fire Company has an expenditure in there for the removal of their floor drain, their current 30-year-old floor drains, and another expenditure for the installation of their new floor drains. Those are scheduled to occur in 2021. They've identified the contractor, they've got the bids, and they're ready to move forward. And I'm not quite sure where the slip up came, because I told the fire department to be sure to tell the trustees staff that these were fiscal 2021 expenditures, not 2020. So they should not be in this consent agenda, and I'm removing them. They'll reappear next time. I don't want to mix expenditures for the two fiscal years together, because I think that would just add a potential source of confusion, and I'd rather keep them separate. So it's likely on our next agenda that there will be a consent agenda for 2020 expenditures. That'll be the end of this year, and another consent agenda for 2021 expenditures that'll be the beginning of next year. But for the time being, we'll remove those two things, and the rest of them are expenditures for fiscal 2020. Does any trustee wish any of the other ones removed before we address the motion? Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by trustee Raymond. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Shaw. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. That motion carries. And that brings us to commissioner reports. Does any liaison have anything to report to the board tonight?
I just have, oh, go ahead, John.
Okay. Just as one reminder, I guess, out there is that this is the last week that the DPW will be collecting any loose debris, brush, clippings, leaves. And then after this week, it will have to be bagged or bundled. So just putting that information out.
Thank you. Trustee Cormos.
Well, the Park and Tree Board met. We had a good meeting. We talked about the recommendations for Henry's, made some recommendations, and Henry's will be taking down those two trees that were causing so much trouble shortly. And, you know, they plan on replacing the trees themselves. We made a recommendation and gave them some maintenance advice as well. We're going to see what else. I guess there were some trees on Milton near Ford Street that were pruned drastically, and we discussed that issue, and we feel like there needs to be more education to the public about what our tree code says, what you can and can't do. You know, that street trees, I think there's some confusion. Sometimes residents think those trees are theirs and that they can trim them, and the code says you can't. So we plan on, you know, putting some stuff out so that people understand, you know, what the rules are. And then on the Capital District Transportation Committee grant. We are going to start that process next week with a session discussing the details of the grant, and then pull a small group together to select a consultant. And so, that process will probably take 2 or 3 months before work actually, starts on the grant and on the planning. And there is, of course, plans to have public input during the process. CDTC has been doing this, I think, for 10 or 20 years, and they have a method down. So they will give us a lot of direction on, what the RFP looks like and how the process goes. And they include a lot of other parties, including transportation, DOT, all of those folks as well. So it'll be an interesting process. On the tree grant, which should have been announced by now, it's very similar to what we heard earlier. Everything's on hold, although I did get a call from the reviewer asking some questions, making a slight modification in our ask amount. So, they're still talking to us, so we'll see when that grant gets released. I think we have a good chance to get it.
Thank you.
That's
Any other liaison reports?
Yes, I have been working with the library on their reopening plan. Interestingly, the library could reopen if they were ready, which is sort of surprising. But what we're going to be doing is with curbside service only. They're treating libraries, which makes sense, sort of almost like retail. So what they're going to be doing between now and June 15th is getting back all the books. So if anybody who has a member of the public who has books or audio tapes or whatever, the Dropbox is going to be open, but all of that stuff is going to have to be cleaned, stored in certain waiting areas and then reshelved. And also the sales system, which has been down, the interlibrary transfer of books, which has been down, is going to have to be reactivated. So this is all going to take some time, but the library staff will be working, in shifts to do social distancing. But what will happen with the hope is by June 15th, they will be able to do, curbside service for books and audio tapes. But it doesn't look like the actual physical programming is going to happen until later in the summer or the fall, where people are coming into the library. And obviously all of that has to be in phases and it's going to be controlled, but that's the date. So as soon as Jeff opens up the Dropbox, there's going to be a notice on Instagram and the Facebook page and in the press, and then people can start bringing back these library books and tapes, audio tapes and things that they have. And June
Okay.
15th is the day we're shooting for.
All right, moving along to other business. We do have a couple of items of other business that did not make it onto the agenda because they got in too late for the agenda, but that I would like to take care of. The first is, I'm not sure if the trustees are aware, but the Union Fire Company received its brand new, shiny, sparkly, gorgeous fire truck this past week. And we got the invoice. And although, of course, we all knew about the fire truck because it was approved by the prior board in 2019, and we approved the bond, which we have since taken out and the money is in the bank. It's never actually been on an agenda to approve the expenditure. So now that we have received the fire truck company would like to be paid for it. So I would like to ask for a motion to authorize the payment of $554,540, 554,540, to Bulldog Fire Apparatus of New York, Inc. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you. Trustee Shaw, is there a second?
I'll second.
You didn't light up, was it, Krista? Was it?
Christine.
Yeah, okay. I guess you didn't talk long enough for the yellow box to show up around your picture. So we have a motion by trustee Shaw and a second by trustee Fitzpatrick. Is there any discussion?
The money's in the bank?
Money's in the bank.
Okay. Just want to make double check. That's a big chunk of change.
It is, and we got another one coming. Don't forget, we ordered, or they ordered two.
Yep.
All right, all in favor say aye.
All right.
All right.
Aye.
All opposed?
When are they going to be able to show these things off? They should be like driving them around the village. It must be exciting.
Yeah. They had, they actually sent me a text and said, if you want to come over and see it when it's delivered, here's the time. But I had a conflict, so I couldn't go. But they do have very nice pictures of it on their Facebook page.
All right.
So go on Facebook and search on Ballston Spa Fire Department. You'll see pictures of all sorts of angles of this thing, and it is really quite spectacular, I'll have to say.
Well, we should share some of those on the village page. Be good for people to know that they got a new piece of
Yeah,
equipment.
that's a good idea.
Good stuff.
Yeah, we got to keep the miles down on that. It's got to last 30 years.
Right. Madam Clerk, would you make yourself a note to get some of those nice pictures from the fire department and
Yes, I will.
get them on the website?
Your thing.
Thank you. The other item of other business for tonight is, as the board knows, because I sent out an email, I was approached late last week by some property owners with a request that when restaurants are allowed to reopen on a limited basis, and we're expecting that they're going to have to socially distance and have their tables so far apart, and as you know, most of our restaurants in downtown are in fairly small spaces, and if they had to space their tables out inside those small spaces, they probably wouldn't be able to get enough tables in to pay their overhead. So they've requested that we consider on possibly something like 3 evenings a week, closing Front Street in the evening between Bath Street and Low Street, keeping an emergency lane down the middle, which would also be available for pedestrian usage, and allowing the restaurants to put tables on the sidewalks and on the edges of the streets. I think that's a great idea, and what I would like to do, if the board approves, is appoint a committee, a small group of these people who came to me with this idea, and ask them to flesh it out, write it down, fill in all the details, and formally present it to the board at our next meeting. They're phase 3, so they shouldn't be opening before June 17th if the schedule sticks. And our next meeting
I
is
would,
8th, I think.
suggest that, they include, once they've got a draft of whatever, that Stephanie take a look at it before we get it. So that it, conforms to whatever language it should have in it. And she can raise any red flags if there are any.
Well, it's going to be essentially a temporary waiver of our regulations against blocking the sidewalk. And I think the village board has the authority to close streets at any time. So,
Okay.
but
I guess the
have no
only question I would have is obviously, I think I raised it with you, the mayor, is with respect to parking and just making sure that we have arrangements in place, like hard sort of agreements with the people who are going to be providing overflow parking before we move forward, because the worst thing that could happen obviously is we agree to do this, and then the people who have sort of generously offered to let us use or let the village use their parking decide, maybe that's not a good reason, or maybe they send it to a lawyer and the lawyer says, geez, this is a big liability issue, you can't do this, and then we've got the streets closed down and nobody has anywhere to park, because obviously that corridor on Front Street is significant parking for people who would be going to these restaurants. So
Okay.
I think we just need to parallel path the sort of the formalization of those parking agreements with the decision to go forward in this way.
At this point, we have verbal approval from both the county and the EOC that that people can use their lots during non-business hours.
Can we just get an email?
Yeah, we can probably do that. I was going to say, I don't know if they'd be willing to put that in a legal document or for.
No, I'm not. I just want something in writing that it's not just, you know, somebody on the phone at some point. Like, it would be good to have an email to wave in somebody's face if anybody else, from somebody who actually has authority to give us the permission to do that, right? Like, especially with respect to the county, you know.
Okay.
I'm less worried about the county, honestly, than I am about the EOC, because that's public property, you know. It's the EOC that gives me a little bit of agita, just make sure that they, you know, have actually crossed their T's and dotted their I's and are letting us do this.
Well,
We may have to give them something.
They told
as
me that the sign
insurance.
said that they were open to the public after hours, and they said, here, come walk across the street and we'll show you. And I walked across the street and they didn't say that. And they said, huh, well, we thought they said that. Well, next time we change them, we'll make sure they say it. So that's where we are with EOC.
You know,
Well, there is a liability issue and it's their property, so they may want something, you know, insured like we do with, like we ask of folks. You know, that if something happens on that property, our insurance, you know, covers it like it covers our public parking lots.
I have been, you know, this idea has been kicking around. I think a lot of people have been thinking about this, and there's a way, different ways to configure this. Like, is there anything that would preclude us from, for example, turning the area from on Front Street, from Bass Street up to right before, before the post office and O'Brien's, into something like a mall, you know, a street that would be permanently closed, keep parking available on Low Street. You know, that could be, you could use that, have that parking, and you'd have parking on Low Street, on Bath Street, on Milton, and just have it sort of as a pedestrian mall for a permanent basis. It could work with the farmer's market. You know, so there are a number, you know, is there anything, can we explore that kind of an idea, or can this group explore that kind of an idea, or can we provide input to that?
Well, I actually think that this is a good sort of experiment for whether that could work. I mean, you know, I think that if we do this on a kind of trial basis, then we have the conversation as we move along with the business community, you know, with public safety folks, fire, police, everybody else. You know, is this working? Is this feasible? Is it good? Because my sense is that, you know, I know that Mayor, you said you already talked to to Dave. I think we need to talk to Mike Bayshore also, unless you've already talked to him.
Yeah.
With respect to you know, ability to access, you know, if there's an emergency. Obviously, there are lots of municipalities that we all know of who have streets that are generally closed to pedestrians, so there are protocols for dealing with this, or closed for pedestrians. So there are streets that there are protocols for this. I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. But anyway, Christine, I think that my sense is, like, I don't know that we have enough information to make a decision on that right now, but
Oh, no, I know, but I'm just.
it strikes me that after we go through this process, it'll be the perfect kind of, you know, testing ground for whether that's a good idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I would also like to, you know, I've spoken to a number of people about this, and I'd like to know who, and I'm sure you're going to share that with us, who's going to be on this ad hoc committee, just so we can, you know, so that others, you know, can provide input. And I have to say that everybody I have spoken to, and that's been a number of people, about this idea of closing it, if not temporarily, but permanently, think that it is a great idea. As long as, you know, there's got to be some access to parking. which
Right.
is, You know,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
I
I would
think
say
The
that,
other,
the biggest issue with that is we need to find a place nearby that is going to replace 100% of the parking. And the other issue would be anybody who lives in an apartment along that street, you are going to displace. So
well,
that needs to be a consideration.
well, if you left Low Street open, and we're not going to debate this, but if you left Low Street open for parking, the people who were parking on Front Street, it's not so far that they're, you know, away from, you know, that's not so far. That's why I would think that leaving Low Street open for parking would be a good idea.
I have a question. If a vendor or restaurant wants to use their parking lot for dining space, is that something that's allowed, or does that also require, you know, because I could see somebody like Augie's or whatever taking a few spots in their parking lot and extending their dining, or other restaurants up on the north end or so on. I just wondered, does that violate the village code to do that parking lots are just for parking? Because I think we should, you know, that may be also a request, particularly for restaurants that do, you know, for the Factory, Legends, you know, Ribbon Cafe,
The
those
Mexican
folks that
place
have
up
parking
there,
lots.
what's the Cilantro? Cilantro, that Mexican place on Milton.
Yeah, yeah, anybody that's got a parking lot,
Sure.
you know, they may want to take some of those spaces and turning it into dining.
I mean,
Just a thought that that's kind of the logical thing for,
leaving aside the code question for just a second, which obviously needs to be checked, because I don't know the answer to your question off the top of my head, Liz, but from a policy point of view, I mean, it seems like something that we shouldn't have a problem with, right? I mean, if we're going to let people,
No.
if we're going to close down the Front Street and let people put tables out in the street, seems like we should be willing to let them put them in their own parking lot.
Lot, sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
their own parking
Makes
lot.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it just
Then
sounds
the
like a
other
waiver.
thing, would we allow people to dine in Wiswall Park?
I don't see why not. We let people in there now and they can take food with them if they want.
But how do we
No, I mean-
assign space?
That's something the committee can work out if it's just open to anybody, but, you know, if you were buying a pizza at Pizza Works, there's no place to go with that
People
pizza
can do that
anymore.
now. I mean, you can take your pizza down to the park and like have a picnic, right? I mean, there's no.
Yeah.
Well,
But
there's no
what
tables.
Liz is talking about is actually maybe having tables set up that the restaurant would actually provide and say, you know, seating for, I don't know, Nomad, or seating for, you know, Pizza Works.
With all due respect, I think
Assume
we
a
should
penalty
let
is
the committee
associated
put the
with that.
plan before we
Yeah.
solve all the details.
Good idea.
Okay, thanks.
Here's the delegation.
All right.
So
any-
you'll let us know, Mayor, who's going to be on this delegation?
Yeah, I haven't asked anybody yet, but I've definitely got some people in mind.
Okay,
And you can probably guess exactly who they are, but let me ask them first.
okay.
All right. Thank you. That brings us to public comment. And since everyone in attendance tonight is well known and loved and respected by us all, I'm going to allow public comment in person. And if you want to make a public comment, raise your hand. And I see one hand, and so I will recognize Frank Rossi. Please give us your address and your comment.
First off, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes,
And I don't know if I'm loved and all that stuff, Mr. Mayor, but we'll go anyway with it. 63 Saratoga Ave, Apartment B. I want to say two things. First, just a warning to everyone that over the next 2 days, The final piece of the work that was worked on last year on the High Street, Route 50, Route 67 corridor to make a dedicated right turn lane from High Street to Church Avenue is going to be completed. We ran into problems last year because everything was mobilized for the finishing of Exit 3 by the governor. So the subcontractors that we were using were unable to do our work before the winter time. And that will be finally completed. We were trying to do this obviously in April or even March, but I think you know why we couldn't. So tomorrow and on Thursday, that work should be completed to make things a little bit more, everybody tries to make that a right turn anyway, as it is. That's the thing that we're trying to avoid. It'll move the center line over a little bit and make it a little bit more definitive about the right turn movements, et cetera, over there. So give a little extra time for the next couple of days when you're over there. Number two, I've been giving this speech to Milton and to Ballston, so don't take this personally, but it's important. Noah, I raise your name whenever I talk about it, actually. Back probably a good, 6 weeks ago or so, we were talking about small businesses and the effects of this on them in a meeting like this back then. And your question was, what can we do as a community to try to get things going in the right direction for them? And I shared the idea we need to get the information for money that's out there for those small businesses. I think a lot of communities have failed to do that. I think there's a lot of confusion still about who does qualify, who doesn't. There are now 3 categories. In fact, I just learned of one during this meeting. A barbershop that I represent down in New York City reached out to me, and I actually looked it up while we were watching the meeting. There's the EIDL, which if you haven't applied for already, it's only for agricultural businesses right now, any new applications. It's the PPP, which is the well-known one, which I think has 4.4 million successful loans that have been handed out so far, but still has $130 billion to be expended out of that fund, the second tranche of the fund that they have. And I still think a lot of people qualify that have not put the money out for it. Or put the application out for it to get the money. And the third now is the New York Forward loans. There's $100 million out there. Unfortunately, the capital region only gets 4% of it. And the irony is, I think Western New York only has about 200,000 more people in it, in that region, yet they get 8% of it. But $4 million is up for grabs for anybody that did not get any PPP or EIDL money. And there are a fair number of businesses like barbershops, for instance, that didn't have employees because they were kind of 1 or 2 partners in the business that wouldn't have qualified for any funding for the PPP that might qualify for something like that. $4 million in a 1 million person region is not a lot of money, but it could get somebody $20,000, $30,000 for rent, et cetera, that they don't have currently. They will be taking pre-applications starting today. They're going to grant the money based on regions that have reopened and the industries inside those regions that have reopened. And it's something that we should push people to do besides the PPP, this also, because every dollar we bring to this community helps small businesses stay open and gives us real sales tax relief a little bit, because they will probably spend that money locally, or at least in part. So we need to do a better job than we have been doing to try to make sure our sales taxes don't go completely down the rabbit hole that way, and also that the small businesses don't disappear. I saw Wired in Malta is not coming back as Wired in Malta. They're going to do a smaller shop in Saratoga, it looks like, without a real cafe component. Get used to those changes, get used to those notices. Unfortunately, that is going to become a way of life for us over the next 3, 4, 5 months, it looks like, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. That's helpful information. We appreciate it.
Can I just take him up on the invitation just quickly, Mayor?
Sure.
And I've been thinking a lot about, who the right sort of communicators are with respect to all of this information. As some of the other people on the video conference will attest, I try to send along information that I can. I think on balance, the BSBPA and Prosperity Partnership and the Chamber of Commerce for Southern Saratoga County and for Saratoga County have been providing really great information. And I think my thought is that if we tried to kind of add on to that, it would probably only create confusion. So the best that we can do is kind of bump what those folks are putting out and make sure that their sort of guidance and resources are being made available and that people know that they're available. We probably could do a better job of that. I think the biggest problem, honestly, is that there are just so many overlapping programs that people don't know where to turn, and simplifying it all is difficult. So, but in terms of the communication and kind of municipalities being the primary source and kind of go-to, I don't know. I mean, it's like more communicators all saying the same or slightly different things. I'm not sure is helpful when you've got the business organizations really sort of spending 24/7 on it.
Okay, is there any other public comment tonight? Not seeing any hands. Last call. We do have occasion to go into executive session tonight to discuss a specific personnel matter. We are not going to conduct any business when we come back. We're simply going to pass the motion to adjourn that you see at the end of the agenda. There's no possibility that any business that will need to occur tonight is going to arise during this executive session. And I'm making this long-winded because what I would really like to do, if the 5 members of the public who are with us will permit me, is to remove you 5 from the meeting, and then the board will stay on this same meeting and have its executive session. Otherwise, we all have to get off. I have to start a whole nother meeting. We have to do a whole nother meeting, and then we have to come back to this meeting. And if there's no objection from the 5 members of the audience, I would ask that I just remove you and that the board go ahead right here where we are now to have our executive session. You obviously do have the legal right to stay around and watch us adjourn if you want to exercise that right, but I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't do that tonight. Any objection from the public? No hands raised. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That makes my life a lot easier. I will remove you from the meeting along with the people who don't need to go into executive session with us, and we'll be back momentarily to take up the executive session. Thanks for coming tonight, everyone.
Thank you.
I suppose they could log in at the end of our executive session if they wanted to see us adjourn.
Not if I remove them.
Oh, okay.
Larry, you'll let me know what time?
I will.
Thank you.
Bye, Terry.
Bye, I'm going.
Bye.
Okay, I don't know how to get out of here.
I can remove you. I can remove you.
All right, good.
Or you can leave.
Bye-bye,
Bye,
everybody.
Mary.
Bye.
Mary.
Or not.
I can just shut it down.
There you go.
I'm removing you. You're removed.
Oh,
Okay.
executive session on Zoom. Interesting.
Executive session on Zoom.
And we're not recording, right?
I was just about to ask, should I turn off the recording?
Yeah.
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 Public session. We're now in public session. It is 8:40. We've adjourned the executive session, returned to public. And I'd like to ask for a motion that vouchers number 20-00732 to 20-02030 be audited and the meeting adjourned at 8:42 p.m. Can I have that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by trustee Fitzpatrick. Second was by trustee Raymond. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Hi.
All opposed, nay. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. Good night, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.